Okay, so I'm here with Marianne George. Marianne George is a worship leader, songwriter, and musician who is currently a part of Maverick City Music. She made her solo debut in 2021 with her EP release, Not Just Stories, which debuted at number 12 on the Top Christians album chart. She chats with Pierre about songwriting, worship, and mental health. Um, so, how did you come to know Jesus? Did you always grow up in the church?
Yes. So I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents were saved. So I always kind of grew up in church. Pretty much grew up like my parents were singers and worship leaders as well. So I feel like I always grew up around worship and like music. And yeah, it was kind of like my whole life growing up.
Oh, nice. No, that's really cool. So I guess this kind of answers the next question, but what led you to worship music? And then can you also share about how did you join Maverick City Music?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I grew up around music like pretty much my whole life. My parents used to like my whole family is very musical, so it's like every holiday that we had some sort of music attached to it. So if it's like Valentine's Day, we're singing songs about love like as a family. And so we always just kind of had a lot of fun just whipping out different instruments, singing together, harmonizing together. Like my parents and like their siblings used to sing for church, and so they would do that, and so like their kids, me and my cousins, like would do the same thing. And so I kind of always grew up doing that. I used to do like a ton of covers on YouTube, which I really don't know if they're still up there, and I really hope they're not because they're so bad. They're so embarrassingly bad. But yeah, I used to do a ton of stuff on YouTube. And then one year I decided to cover a song, and it turns out well, this was on Instagram now. I covered a song on Instagram, and one of the writers of the song ended up being the founder of, well, the now founder of Mav. And so he had reached out to me via DMs and was like, hey, like you're really good at what you do, like I would love to have you come, and I'm hosting this little writing camp, like it's a little bit more exclusive, like it's not a public thing, but I would love for you to come. And so I was like, sure, let's do it. And this guy was also like Tony, his name is Tony Brown, and he was part of a band called House Fires. He ended up writing Good Good Father, and he is like brilliant. We did that one camp. Like I did a camp with him, and I've not stopped doing camps with them since. And I think after that camp it became Maverick City. It wasn't called, I don't know if it was called Mav City when we started. I don't think it was. But it became Mav City like after that. It didn't have a name, but it was really, really awesome. That was the camp. I think that was Joel's first camp too. I can't remember if there was anyone else that was new. Aaron's first camp, I think. A few of the members, like that was their first camp. Lizzie's first camp. Um, I think the original people were like Alton, Dante, and Majesty, who's no longer a part of the group. Um, but yeah, it was really awesome.
Do you have any advice for young Christians who are interested in pursuing music? Because I know within at least within the Salvation Army, a lot of young kids are involved in the worship team or the bands that are a part of the churches within the Salvation Army. So, any advice for those like young Christians who are
Yeah.
interested in pursuing music?
Yeah, I think that, I get this a lot. And I feel like, especially when we were on tour, we got a lot of questions kind of asking about this. And I really encourage people to just be themselves. Like, I think there's so many people who are trying to um, recreate like Mav well, Mav is different because I feel like it's a collective. So I feel like it's never really going to be the same. And honestly, like, what I love about Mav is I feel like we encourage people to do the same things that we're doing in their own communities. So when I say like, don't try to be me, I'm saying like, don't try to like, you know, act like me, or like I say, like each of us are created in such a unique image, and such like I believe each person is created in the image of God, and it's so unique. We're all so uniquely different. Like I'm so different from you, you're so different from me, but we both carry an image of God in us. Like, and so I feel like that's such a beautiful thing. Like I think that God made us like that to show more of himself to the world. And so I always encourage people, like, if you want to grow in music, continue to do what you believe you're good at. Like, do what you feel like you're called to do. So for some people, that is like writing music and posting it online. For some people, that's like doing like, leading at their church, and that's like what they feel like they're called to do, like lead at their home church. And so it's just different for everybody. But I say, like, don't try to conform or sound like someone else. Like, own your voice, own your sound, and go forth with that, because that's what makes you stand out. Like, I don't want to sound like Naomi. Like, I don't want to sound like um I don't know, Natalie Grant, like, or Lauren Daigle. Like, I would rather sound like me, and I feel like there is no other me in this industry, in this world, right? So I feel like the one piece of advice I give is just be yourself, because that's what makes you you, and that's what makes you stand out. And so, and I think that's what God likes. Like, I think he created us a certain unique way, and he wants to hear what we have to say, as us, not as someone else. So own your voice, walk in it.
Good. Yeah, I think that's good advice for anyone, not just in the music industry. But yeah, I really that's really good. Um, kind of shifting. That's kind of a next good shift into the next question. But who are your musical influences?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, this like changes because I'm often asked by like friends or people who meet me, like, who influences you. Like, I think vocally there's people, and then there's like songwriting wise there's people. So there's like I'm very much, I grew up listening to like Bethel and Hillsong a lot. Um and like I remember being a kid listening to like I don't even know how to say her name. Stacy or Orico or Orico. I used to listen to her. I used to listen to um like Avalon, these like what do you call it? What was that one group? Oh my gosh. It was like another band, like a Christian band that was super popular, and I forgot the name. So clearly I didn't listen to them enough. But I used to listen to like bands, like I used to listen to a lot of like Lauren Hill. Like there was like a lot of like gospel influences. I had this one phase where I was listening to like alternative rock. and and there's one band to this day I still think they're so good. It's called Alter Bridge. It's not Christian, but it's called Alter Bridge, and the guy who is like the lead vocals, his name is Miles Kennedy, and I still to this day think he has like one of the most insane ranges. So I used to listen to that a lot. I listen to a lot of like Whitney Houston, like a lot of like more ballady, big vocals. Adele, I love Adele. I love like the way she sings. I love Beyonce, would like copy her riffs. Love Tori Kelly. These are more now recent, but lately I've been listening a lot to like singer songwriters. So I started listening a lot to this girl named Lizzie McAlpine, Jeremiah. There is one more I'm missing. Phoebe Bridgers, Bonnie Vare. There's just a lot that I'm inspired by now that I've maybe it's not as much in the worship sphere, but honestly I'm also inspired by like my friends. Like I love listening to Naomi's new record is so good. She just released a live recording that is going to be insane. Like so good. Brandon, I'm so inspired by the way Brandon writes. And it's a hard question because I feel like I'm also inspired by things that are not musical. And so I love nature and I love the beach. I go near the water a lot. I'm so inspired by that. I was living in Missouri and I was not near an ocean or water. Like I don't feel like lakes count, but I moved back to New York and moved back to Long Island, which is where I'm from. And it's just been so nice to be near a beach. I'm so inspired by the water and so inspired by like sunsets and sunrises and like my child now. I'm very inspired by her. So there's like constantly things I feel like I'm being inspired by. Food sometimes inspires me. If we're being real. I love food. So yeah, very inspired by a good meal, you know. But yeah, those are my some of my like very blank. Oh, John Bellion, so inspired by him. I feel like he's incredible. Um, yeah, there's just I'm forgetting a lot right now, but there's so many more that I've listened to. Leanne La Havas is another one that I'm like obsessed with. Holly Humberstone, Luca Fagale. Yeah, there's a lot of artists. I just listed
Yeah.
so many, but yeah.
Yeah, no worries. um, so, how does your personal relationship with God influence your songwriting and worship? I might add.
Ooh. I feel like it is directly connected. I think there are times though that like I'll go through something in my personal life. And one of the things I love about worship, at least my definition of worship, is like it's basically just reiterating who God is in action. So like I feel like there are certain songs that I sing in worship that technically aren't worship. They're just more like man to man songs. Like they're just like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't feel like to me that's worship. Like I consider worship songs that are like glorifying, exalting, telling the Lord who he is. Right. And so I feel like even when I go through a personal situation that may not always feel great, um, it's 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 still the fact does not change that God is who he is. And so I'm able to go into worship sets or like worship like environments and still declare who God is because that doesn't change despite my circumstance or what I'm going through. Now, when it comes to songwriting, I do feel like a lot of the things I'm experiencing or going through, like a lot of my process with God, it doesn't always come out in a song. And I honestly prefer it to not come out always in song. I think it comes out in like dialogue or like journaling or conversations with people close to me or prayer. But there are times where I feel like it does come out in song. One of the songs on my album was actually kind of just like detailing this personal relationship I had with God. It's called Journey, and it says like sometimes you gotta rise, sometimes you're gonna fall, like sometimes you gotta lose yourself to find your way home. And like I feel like that was pretty much like my personal journey with God, where I was like, there are days where I felt like things were so great between us. We were like buddies. and, and then there are days where I just feel like I was going through a really dark season and I didn't feel like not that I didn't feel like God was real, but because I knew he was real, but there are times where I feel like God didn't want to work for me. Like he didn't want to move on my behalf, but he was willing to move on all my friends' behalfs, just not mine. Like he doesn't love me or like, there are days where I go through that. And so like Journey was one of those songs where I like kind of like detailed that part of my relationship with God. But then on my another song on my EP called I'm Gonna Worship was basically detailing a personal struggle that my husband and I went through with his career. And we kind of had to choose this, make this decision that whatever the outcome is gonna be, we're gonna worship and we're gonna trust you instead. And so there's like a lot of songs that I do write. Yes, they are dictated by my personal life, but there are also times where there was a song called Sufficient for Today that was released by Mav, and that was not written for me, essentially. I wrote it thinking of a friend of mine that was going through cancer. So it's like there are other times where I feel like I'm writing for other people or I feel burdened to write for someone else or, you know, but I feel like we're all reflections. We are the body of Christ, right? And so for songwriters writing songs for the church, we represent the church in many ways. So my personal relationship with God is also an extension or an echo of a lot of people in the church. And so I just kind of like feel like that is necessary. I do feel like there needs to be a relationship with God in order to write songs for God and for the church, right? But I don't always feel like, I feel like there are a lot of times where um people aren't always honest, like, with their relationship with God. And I think there's room and space, and God is not afraid of songs that are kind of real about how things suck between him and me. Like, so there are times where I have really sad songs because I'm just like, God, where are you? Why aren't you listening to me? I miss you. I need you. Like, I feel alone, blah, 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 blah. And it's a lot like David in the Psalms, like writing songs about like how he's so discouraged. And so I feel like those are all songs about my personal relationship with God. And I think that's beautiful. And I think he loves it. I think he'd rather us come to him.
So, what excites you about being in the music industry, specifically the Christian music industry today, like in 2022, 2023, which is coming up, and especially as a member of the South Asian community, because I know that's not represented as much. So,
Wow. Thank you for asking this question because I'm going to be honest, there are days where it's really hard. And I feel like all you can really think about are the negatives. So this is a really good positive thing to ask. It's a good question to ask me to reflect. So, I am so excited for the season that like Christian music is in right now. I mean, not because I feel like Mav is dominating and everything, because that is amazing. But I also feel like one of the things about Mav that I feel like makes it stand out in our industry is the fact that it's so diverse and it's this collective versus like, I feel like for so long, and when you talk to anyone in Mav or like, when you look at how Mav started, it started because there was these like lines between CCM and gospel. It was like very like, almost like CCM was like the more white side, and then like gospel was like more black. But now I feel like we're like combining these two, and we're kind of just like blurring these lines and making it like everything is the same. And so I feel like one of the things though that makes Mav stand out is that we're so diverse. Like there's no one person that has one sound. So people like me, and I can sound both CCM and I can sound also black and gospel. Like maybe not black, but gospel. I can sound like have a more gospel sound. And so I feel like I love that our group, like all the artists that sing in our group can do both. And I feel like that's not something that was always a thing. Like, and so I love that like walls and barriers and kind of these like expectations or are being kind of broken down in our specific Christian music industry. And now people are like, man, I can do that. Like I can do that too. And then even being a South Asian, I feel like naturally we're not represented as much, probably because we're immigrants and we just, we never really found. I feel like growing up, like my parents, they didn't have the privilege or the opportunity of pursuing things that they felt like they were good at. They did what they felt would make money for their family and provide. And so I'm part of this next generation that now has this unique opportunity to pursue the things that like I feel naturally inclined to, which is music. And so getting to do that and then to show other kids' parents or like the kids that are coming after me, like, hey, it's possible for me. Now, this is just, I'm not even talking spiritual. I'm just specifically talking about um, just like career, right? But I'm giving kids or girls, even girls, because that's a big thing too. Females in the Christian, it's a whole thing. Anyway, but females that are colored, like people of color, females, like I'm giving them an opportunity to see someone that looks like them. And it doesn't always mean that they have to be doing worship or doing songwriting, but I want them to feel encouraged or empowered to do what they feel like they're called to do, maybe in an industry that's not as represented by them. And so I feel excited by that because I feel like it's time. Like it's just time to see more of us like standing up, rising up, like not staying in our churches and our communities, but extending and branching out. Like I said earlier, like there's something unique about me that you might not have, but there's something unique about you that I don't have. And for so long, like, I feel like we have seen non-immigrants taking the stage, and now to have people, from my culture or from my community doing that, it's really, really awesome to have that, to really have that representation. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm really encouraged, and I hope that I get to see more people like me, more females of color, um, just rising up and doing really cool things. I mean, this is so random, but like one of the things that I loved was as a kid, I used to grow up. When you're talking about music and musical influences, I remember as a kid in like middle school or high school, I did a cover of Nicole C. Mullen. Like she did this song, "My Redeemer Lives," and she was like a black woman in CCM, and that was not very common to see at the time. She was like one of the only, I feel like one of the only black women doing that. And so I remember being a kid, like being so inspired by her, and I did a cover of her song and stuff like that. Like, so I don't know. I just like felt like she represented herself in a space that didn't usually see a lot of black people. In the same way, like I want to be able to represent myself, but also represent Christ, because what I have in me is unique. And I feel like God created me to inhabit spaces like this. So he's just, making the table wider, bringing more people in. And so I'm excited to see what's to come.
A quick question, like, do you have anything exciting in the works that you could share, like, for 2022, 2023, or
A few of my live plays, the few of the shows that I've been doing live, I've been sharing some music that I'm working on. But I would like to create another album, but not an EP. It would be like an album. Um, and that is going to be very exciting. I think it's going to sound very different from my last one. My EP that I released was very much like a culmination of the last like 10 years of my life. It was like the album that I've always wanted to release as a kid, and like growing up into my calling and gifting and all of that. And I do still feel like it represents the deepest, like foundational core of who I am is that album. And I'm so glad that that was the first thing I released. But I also love experimenting into like folk worlds and like indie and like some chill pop. And so I have friends that I like, will we'll work together on some stuff and just mess around in the studio and try some different things. So I have like some things that I am working on. I am just writing right now, just kind of like writing, and we just got off of a huge tour. I just moved to a new back home to my new state. I just had a baby, so there's a lot of transition. But I do feel very inspired by everything that's happening, and I have a lot to say. So there will be, hopefully in the next, I'm not gonna like put a time on it because I really don't want to, but like hopefully in like the next couple of years, I want to release something. I would like to release a few singles this year, so that's a goal of mine. But yeah, just not, I'm not gonna try to put pressure on me to create immediately, but just kind of like taking it easy. But I am creating. Things are being created. I know Mav has an album that we're creating as well, so that's exciting. It will be very fun to have just like a Mav album out for the first time in a while. We just released an album with Kirk, but this will be more us, I think. Yeah.
awesome. So I want to kind of talk about mental health because I know you received a master's in clinical, let me get this right, clinical mental health counseling,
Yes.
and you're now a therapist. I think that's awesome. But can you share your journey of becoming a therapist, but like also wanting to become a therapist with doing worship music um, as well?
Yes, so I just want to like clarify. I'm not currently practicing, but yes, I am certified. I have like my degree and everything. Mental health has always been, especially being in South Asian communities, like I am South Asian, and it's not something we talk about a lot in my community. I had been sexually assaulted as a child, and so that was a big part of my journey, and I had like trauma from that. Grew up kind of like experiencing a lot of the trauma of not having talked about it. My parents had known about it, but it's like culturally, it's not something we share. It's not something that's talked about. And my parents knew about it. Like I told them much later in life. Actually, I didn't really explain or share much later until much later. But it's even that like that taboo of like I have to think about like what are they going to say? Like so it's just like I had to grow up with kind of these reservations about mental health and like what um is best for me and what would be best for my family. I kind of always had to choose. And so I kind of felt like I was always destined to have these I was destined to like go into counseling. I always feel like it's like for people who are a counselor, they know, like, or therapists, they know, like, it's kind of like this calling. Like, you just kind of feel like called to it. But I didn't know. I remember I was for so long wanted to do medicine, was going to study to be a physician assistant. And I remember God put it on my heart to start a intervarsity Christian fellowship at my college campus. And so, in the process of doing that, I was meeting so many people, and I really believe the Holy Spirit gave me like wisdom on like how to talk to them and how to share things with them, and like, and so I was meeting different people. Like I went to a commuter school, so there was like 60-year-olds, and then there was like 21-year-olds, and like so there's just like and then they're like very diverse. It was in Queens, New York, so it's like black, Hispanic, like Indian, white, like Native American, like it was just everything. And it was so cool. I was so like I loved the experience of like doing that. And it was so funny because I feel like I did start it like in my senior year of college, so it was just like the last thing. And then I just felt like in my heart, like my aunt was like, "Why don't you go into like counseling?" And I was like, I didn't think about that. And I had switched my major over to psychology at that point, and so I had all these sciencey classes, and I did have this like desire to learn medicine, and I still do. And I think a lot of counseling is integrating like things that you learn about yourself and your body, and like kind of just like because there is this body mind connection that occurs in your and so it's like a lot of people don't realize a lot of the way they feel is based on the way that their body is feeling. And so I've loved exploring that. And so ever since she said that, I enrolled like pretty quickly into a master's of education program for clinical mental health counseling. And it has been such an eye-opening, difficult journey. Not difficult because of the work, not because of the papers or like the degree. It's not even that. It's the mental work that I think people don't realize. It is very difficult to confront things about yourself that maybe you didn't even realize were issues that you had. And it could be things that came from generations. So now the work is on you to break certain like generational rhythms or things that have happened in time. And so like over time, sorry. And so I felt like very, very called to do that for myself, for my children, for the future generations that come after them. Like I want to be able to set that standard now. And my parents, I mean, my family was so great. But obviously, every family has things, right? Like, and it's not even just them, it's just like also culture and community. And even in the Christian world, like Christian industries, like all of these things, like there are certain things that you yourself feel called to like change and do. And I feel like counseling enabled me to see that within myself and activate or empower with the help of God as well. Like I've seen this coupling of both counseling and my faith. Like and it's been really, really beautiful to see that. And so I feel very empowered even now, like when I write a lot for church, and I find that I'm using a lot of my skills in sessions and songwriting sessions. Like, and it's not like I'm doing therapy with people. It's just like active listening skills, or like just kind of like reframing a thought, or like, if somebody says like, I feel this way and this way, it's almost just like there are certain things you'll learn in therapy to like rephrase or to redirect, or and so using that, and they're like, I'll rephrase something, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty insightful. Like, I guess that's what I'm trying to say." Like, and like using that to now write something that is both relatable but also hopeful for the church to sing, like, you know, like, or not even church, or just a person to sing, you know? And so, it's been really, really awesome to see that coupling happen and this marriage between counseling and faith. And I'm really grateful that God had me do the counseling stuff first, because I feel like it's given me so much insight into coming into this industry and this world and meeting people and like learning their stories, learning their backgrounds and where they're coming from. It gives me this non-judgmental place to look at them from, versus like I feel like if I just come in straight from church, or like, you know, I grew up in an all Indian church, so a lot of what I see and experience now is so different from what I grew up experiencing. And so now that I have my counseling background, it's much easier for me to like understand or trace back like why certain things happen. Like when something happens, it's always not like, oh, how could this happen? But rather, let's just like, where does this come from? Like let's talk about that, or let's think about it. Where does this lead? Like it gives you grace for people, I feel, um with my counseling background.
Now, can you explain the role of worship in mental health? Um, I know you kind of elaborated on that, like maybe on your Instagram or your website, and I just want to like know, like, can you explain the role of worship in mental health?
Yes, I feel like I've said this before. There's like I do feel like therapy and going to a therapist is super helpful, and I always encourage like if you feel like medicine is the way to go for you, like that's I feel like God empowers and gives grace to people like doctors and psychiatrists and therapists. Like, and so I do feel like those things are helpful. But at the end of the day, also, I feel like coupled with those things needs to be this relationship with God. And I'm saying, when you say worship, are you speaking specifically to music, or are you kind of just talking about just worship in general, like faith?
I think about worship music,
Okay.
um, but I think I also think about like worship as a spiritual discipline
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
as well.
Hmm.
Um, I think for the sake of this question, probably worship towards more towards worship music and
Hmm.
when you're gathered in church and you're worshiping with other believers.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
corporate, like more corporate worship.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
and I'm sorry that I asked that question, but I
No, no,
also
you're
feel like
fine. You're
we need the
fine.
I do feel like we need the clarification, because I do feel like worship is not just music, but yeah, like I agree with you. I think there is a beauty that corporate worship brings into any sort of situation that someone might be going through, like any sort of circumstance. Corporate worship brings something so beautiful and almost like endearing and warm. I feel like, you know, there have been times where I've had a really, really hard week, and I'll come into worship, corporate worship at a church, and sometimes I'm leading, sometimes I'm not, but I will experience like the warmth and the presence of God like so thick and so comforting in that moment. And it gives me kind of what I do. It gives me what I need for the week. And like this is why I really strongly encourage like anyone to like involve themselves in some sort of church or small group weekly, because I really believe that helps with just like I feel like when I don't go to a like church on Sunday, it doesn't like I don't have something to hold on to. And I have my own personal walk, but there's something really beautiful about fellowship and corporate worship together. It reminds you you're not alone. Like it reminds you that you have other people that are walking this journey with you, and it's so important to be a part of. And there's something beautiful about collective singing. Like you, I'm sure there's like literal like studies done on like what collective singing does. Like that's why people love to go to concerts, right? We love to go to concerts. We love to hear our artists sing, and like we love to sing along, and you're like in a group of people that all love the same thing. It's like this experience that you're all having together. And that is such a beautiful thing, to experience Jesus together. It's why like Mav tours, like I feel like our worship nights are some of the best, because it's just like you feel so one-minded like with everyone. with everyone. And so I agree. Like I do feel like corporate worship is so important. It gives you like insight into what you're going through, and it opens you up to be vulnerable with other people as well. Like that's the power of worship, that's the power of song, that's the power of music. Like and so I agree. Like I stand by the fact that like if you are going through some sort of mental health issue, like whether it be like some sort of depression, anxiety, whatever, like I strongly encourage everyone to try to get to church once a week at least. Like try to get into a worship setting like once a week. Like try to be around a small group or go to a small group. Like I think those things do like more help. Like and I also like yes, people are hard like to deal with sometimes, and I feel like sometimes especially in Christian worlds, like sometimes the advice that's given in those seasons are not always the most helpful because it's just not very. I don't know. I've experienced it personally. Like I know what that feels like, but I just also want to tell you that like God is still God. Like he is able to work despite what people say. So just the act of showing up like in those spaces, God uses that. And so I want to encourage you, like, even if you're afraid of what people are going to say, or like, or you feel like, I don't want to go to church because I don't want people to see my face. And then they're going to comment on me and they're going to like ask me how I'm doing and I don't want to lie. And I get it. I totally get it. I've been there. Like our saying yes to do certain things despite our circumstances. He honors those things. He loves that we take the effort to do those things. Like, and so he wants to meet with us. Like he really wants to meet with us. And so there was a quote that I just heard today by Smith Wigglesworth. Is that a thing? Um, God is more eager to answer than we are to ask. And I feel like that really stood out to me when I heard it. And so I feel like he does honor that. So I feel like if you're going through that, get yourself into a community, get yourself into like a worship setting, and trust that the Lord is going to meet you there because he always does. He always meets us.
Do you have any advice for young Christians who may be struggling with their mental health? And I kind of want to make it specific where, I mean, it doesn't have to be specific, but young Christians who may have a strong faith, but like are still struggling with their mental health. So any advice?
Yes. I mean, I'm going to be honest. You're speaking to me. Like, I go through that too. Like, I'm a person of faith. I mean, this is like the first time I'll be talking about it publicly, but like, I just had a baby and I'm still kind of dealing with postpartum depression. And so I'm a person that has strong faith. Like, I'm in a group that, like, I write songs for churches. I think that one thing that has encouraged me is that this verse that says, my grace is sufficient for you. And every day he gives me grace for that day. It's like measured grace for that day. And so I've like held on to that. I also like more practically, like I try to plan something every day for myself, like whether that means like taking my child on a walk or like meeting up with a friend that I know is strong in their love for the Lord. Like surrounding yourself with people that are encouraging and that want to see you grow, want to see you like get better. Sometimes like depression and anxiety and things like that just don't magically disappear. They don't. I mean, it's just the reality of what it is. Like they don't magically disappear, but I do believe we can learn certain strategies to, like manage it. And I feel like being around good community is one, like I said, plugging yourself into a church. I've been trying to do uh Bible studies. So there's like this one I'll give you for me it's female. These are female theologians or like Bible teachers that I look up to. One of them is Priscilla Schreier. So she's like saved my behind so many times. Like when I'm going through a really tough season, like I will whip out one of her Bible studies. Like she had one called Discerning the Voice of God. She has one called Gideon. She has one called Elijah. She has like all these different people that she like delves in. It's like 7-week studies where you have like a workbook and there's videos that you can get to watch as well. But I'll do hers, or like Lisa Turkers is another one, Joyce Myers. These are like females. but I'm sure there's Bible studies by males. Even the Bible app like has so many plans that you can enroll in, and like I've found that that has been so helpful for me. Just every day, kind of having something to do. Right now, I'm doing why I said Smith Wigglesworth is because I've been doing his devotional book. And so every day there's a devotion that I would do by him. Another thing that really helped me, and this is like a hit or miss for some people, but liturgies have been so helpful for me to put language to some of the things I'm feeling. And so I've been using that. But I just say like every day, like have something that you can hold on to for that day. Like, and then when you have your church, you go to that weekly, and that's like where I draw like my kind of like the things that I dwell on. It's like with depression and anxiety and like any sort of mental illness, right? It starts in your mind. It starts with the thoughts that you have. And so if we're able to filter our thoughts, like that's what that verse in Romans, I think it's Romans, says, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Like there has to be a renewing of our thoughts. And that starts with what are we consuming? Sometimes it's social media. Like we need to get off of it, or we need to unfollow the things that like are maybe not helping or contributing to the health of our mind, and we have to start there. Like for some people that means just getting off social media period and focusing on their body and their physical health. Like maybe that means like taking walks or running or like working out. For me personally, when I found out that I was going through this like PPD, like postpartum depression, I enrolled myself into personal training. Like I have a trainer that's working with me now, and it's really helped me just feel good about my body and get my body moving, but also just like sweating away some of the negativity or like the negative thoughts that I'm having about myself, or even just self-worth. And so I would encourage like practical things, because I feel like a lot of times if you're growing up strong in faith, you know all the things. Like you know what I'm saying? Like you know all the right answers. You know that God wants to heal you. Like you're not gonna like he doesn't want you to live in depression. Like, you know, we know that God like is for us. Like we know all the things. And that's for me. Like I knew all the things. Like I write songs for people who go through it. Like, you know, but when you go through it yourself, it's like really hard to get out of it. And I think practical things for me has really helped. Watching my food, like drinking more water, like cutting back caffeine, watching my social media accounts, getting off of social media if I need to, like spending time with good community and people I love, listening to sermons or Bible studies, doing that stuff has really, really helped ground me, getting my body moving. Hopefully that's like a good answer, but I get it. I'm there. And chances are like and also you can enroll into therapy. Like that's something that I'm doing too. And like I feel like those things are small, like small daily things that you can do that will over time hopefully help your overall like feeling of this depression or anxiety. You know, I don't want to give you like this answer that's going to be like, yeah, and tomorrow it'll be gone. Like, that's just not real. That's not realistic. But I think having a really strong prayer life and being honest with God as well. God's not afraid of your feelings. Like there was like a period of time recently where I was just like, God, I'm just annoyed because I feel like you literally answer everybody but me. Like, and I was so honest about how I was feeling with him. And I feel like he meets me there. He's not afraid of your feelings about that. You know, like he wants us to be there with him in that time. Like he wants us to choose to come to him versus like anything else or anyone else.